Okay, hello. I'm going to speak mainly about foraging for plants in the carrot family, Apiaceae. But first, I'm going to tell you a bit about who I am and how I ended up doing what I'm doing, some of which will be a little bit serious. I will try and keep the serious stuff short. So I'm one of about 5 people in this country who actually earns his main source of income teaching people to forage and writing about foraging. That's what I do for a living. And how did I end up doing that? Well, many years ago, when I was in my teens, 35 years ago, I got into it just because I got into mushroom foraging first, actually. Having failed to find any liberty caps, I actually tried to work out which ones I can eat. About the same time as I concluded that humans were not going to stop climate change, there's no political solution to it, and I became a complete nihilist, basically. Not many people believed me at the time, but I figured out that civilization, as we know, is probably going to collapse in my lifetime. I was a software engineer. I made flight simulators. In 2005 I was made redundant. I went off and studied philosophy at Sussex University. When I finished that, I ended up completely unemployable. So nobody, I couldn't even get a job stacking shelves, but people did decide that they wanted to pay me to teach them how to forage for mushrooms. So that's how I ended up doing that. I moved to Hastings because there's lots of woodland around here with lots of mushrooms in it. I decided to start collecting photos for a book, and in 2016 this came out, which is the most comprehensive book on fungi foraging in Britain ever published. Sold about 20,000 copies. And then I decided to start work on a book on edible plants and seaweeds. I mean, why not when you've got a successful one about mushrooms? And in that case, I decided actually to reconnect foraging with its history. If you got into foraging, it's really popular now, foraging, but anyone who's got into it in the last 50 years could be forgiven for thinking it was invented by Richard Mabey when he published a book called Food for Free in 1971. The history of that before it seems to have been forgotten. Up until 1955, foraging was about food insecurity. It was a backup for when the cultivated food supply ended, and Richard Mabey basically reinvented it to be about finding you in a hunter-gatherer, and then it became all about high cuisine. But this book, which has just come out in January, it's the first book since the 1950s to actually come from a food insecurity point of view, which I thought people might think I was exaggerating the risk. But in the 2 months since it came out, obviously, the situation has changed rather, and now people are openly talking about global food shortages. We will see what happens. Anyway, right, so that's the serious stuff out of the way. I will now tell you about this plant. This is Alexander's, and mostly at this time of the year there's not much to forage for. But this plant is very common around here. It is called Alexander's, which is a shortening of rock parsley of Alexandria, believe it or not. It's not native. It was brought here by the Romans as a food plant, and it was grown in English kitchen gardens until about the mid-18th century, when it was replaced by modern forms of celery. And since then it's been completely forgotten, and in much of the country you can't find it, but some little pockets of places, especially around coastal areas, it has displaced the native species cow parsley. So where you would normally find cow parsley growing, you find in Hastings, you find Alexander's. That picture was taken behind the White Rock Theatre, and you can see that there's snow there. It was taken during the Beast from the East. So this is actually at its best at this time of year. Now, carrot family are generally very important in terms of cultivated food. It contains things like carrots, parsnips, coriander, fennel, parsley, cumin, dill, angelica. All these things are strongly aromatic. This is about smells, this family. And the one probably most directly connected to this discussion is celery itself. This family, as well as containing lots of good edible species, it contains some of the most dangerous poisonous species. So it's a kind of death and dinner all mixed up together. And there is the most poisonous, dangerous poisonous plant. It's also very common around here, also a member of the APACA. So anyway, Alexander's whole plant is edible. The roots are a bit variable, so sometimes they're overpoweringly bitter, and other times they're good to eat. I've never worked out why. The seeds are used to flavour pickles, black seeds. The flowers are like a rather bitter, aromatic sort of broccoli. And the pollen, and I'm going to pass this round so you can smell it. When a bit later in the year, when these are the first ones are just beginning to flower now, but when the pollen really comes out in about a month's time, it's really quite overpowering. And it's become trendy with really high quality chefs to go around collecting the pollen. They just actually go around and brush tiny little bits of pollen off each individual flower, collecting tiny amounts of this stuff. It's really, really strong flavour and smell. And they use it in seafood dishes, so with oysters and things. The Latin name is Smirnium olosacrum, and if you follow the etymology, the myrrh in Smirnium is actually the same as the myrrh that one of the Magi gave to the baby Jesus. So if you've ever wondered what myrrh smells like, it smells like this. The best thing about it, the reason it was grown, was as a stem vegetable. And I'm going to pass these round so you can smell it actually, but I'm going to drop that silly mic. Where is my knife? Right. Anyone like to have the smell of what? Yeah. So it's the inside of the stem that's the best part for eating. You have to peel it. Oh wow. Now this is really, really common, so you're going to have absolutely no trouble finding this at all.
Where did you get this one?
So what you do with this, if you want to cook it, you need to, like this, get rid of all of the stringy bits, like that. I can't be able to do any more than that. And just some people just parboil it for a couple of minutes, and then throw away the water and then steam it for about 8 minutes, or you can just steam it straight, but the flavour's stronger, and then you serve it with a knob of butter. Absolutely delicious. Now, I'll let you pass that round, fellas. We'll pass all of it round. Anyone else want to sniff? And have a sniff of the flowers as well, because the flowers really are, they're not quite out there, so they haven't quite taken on their proper odour yet. I should have also said, yeah, there is a problem with much foraging that you're stealing from wildlife, and with many cases with many plants and certainly fungi, that is true. It's not true. This is not native, and it completely dominates. Where it's common, it takes over. So it should probably be listed as an invasive species. The only reason it isn't is because it's been here for so long. But you can do no harm to the ecosystem by taking as much of it as you like. But you do need to be careful when foraging for members of the carrot family, and this is why. This is Hemlock water dropwort, which is also, and the plant that this is confused with most common is wild celery, which is obviously rather similar to that. Also has a very strong smell, but at first it kind of smells a bit similar, but after a while you realise that it's actually quite got this unpleasant chemical smell to it. This is the most dangerous poisonous plant in the UK. There are more poisonous plants, but they don't look like anything edible. basically, the roots, 2 roots of this will kill a cow. And it is cows that it usually kills when it gets exposed near riverbanks. But, so have a smell of that. Also very strong smell, but not quite so pleasant. This plant will kill you. If you eat that, you will have a heart attack. Stops your lungs and hearts from functioning, and you will die. So that grows in near water, boggy places. Right. I'm now going to go through some other interesting members of the same family. I listed some that are cultivated plants, so I will now go through some of the more interesting ones in terms of foraging. There is your Alexander's growing behind the White Rock Hotel during the Beast from the East. So that was March the 5th, 2 years ago, whenever it was. No, 4 years ago. That's Alexander's roots. So these are very variable in taste. They're sometimes quite delicious, sometimes overpoweringly bitter, and that's just the way with wild vegetables. They're not like cultivated vegetables where they've been bred for centuries to get the flavour exactly the same each time. That is cow parsley, or wild chervil, which is what Alexander's has displaced around here. That is edible, but it's not particularly tasty, and it's very easy to mix up with hemlock, which will kill you. That's ground elder, which is probably known to gardeners. This was also brought here by the Romans as treatment for gout, but also as a food plant. So you can use that pretty much in where you would use spinach. But you should only use it when the leaves are very young and glossy green, not when they're like this. Ground elder. Well known to gardeners because once you've got it in your garden, you cannot get rid of it. That's hemlock. So this is what Socrates was given to poison him. It has a very similar effect to the hemlock water dropwort. Looks a bit like cow parsley, but it's got these distinct red blotches on, and it smells like hemlock water dropwort. It's got the same sort of chemically cat pea sort of smell to it. Not very nice. There's hemlock water dropwort. Ah, right, this is a really good one. So people don't realise that this is edible. This is hogweed, which has kind of got furry leaves, and you will find that, again, pretty common everywhere in this country. And the best part of this is these shoots. Hogweed shoots, so you want them just as they're like this. And you just kind of cook them in loads and loads of butter. Basically, you keep putting butter in the frying pan until they cook. And that's absolutely delicious. But don't mix it up. Oh, right, I should have remembered that. It's photosensitive. It works like reverse sun cream. So if you get the juice on your hands or any other part of your body and then get around the sun, it works like anti-sun cream. And don't get it mixed up with giant hogweed, which will give you kind of very serious burns. Pig nut. Right, this is one that kids for generations of English children knew what this plant was, but nobody these days has heard of it. This is called a pig nut. So that's what the plant looks like, the top of it looks like. That's what its root looks like. And you have to, the tuber is very rarely underneath here. You have to kind of dig down and follow the stem until you find the tuber. And that's like a cross between a hazelnut and a peanut. Absolutely delicious, and very nutritious, but far too much hard work to bother with unless you're 6. I just need a little bit of water. That is samphire. Now, you may know something called samphire that you get in shops, little fleshy thing, grows in marshes. That stole the name of this plant. This was the original samphire, which tastes like kind of supercharged carrot with a touch of petrol. And it was a very, very popular snack up in London. They used to pickle this in seawater and sell it up in London. But it became so popular, it was foraged out of existence, basically, and people started adulterating it with marsh samphire, which is a completely unrelated plant. Similarly fleshy, but a completely different flavour. Anyway, so marsh samphire took the name samphire, and we now call this rock samphire. Really nice pickled. That is a wild carrot. In fact, it's the maritime version of a wild carrot, called a sea carrot. Recognisable if you, that's its umbel, the flower is called an umbel, and it's got lots of miniature little flowerets, or florets, and the one right in the middle is deep red. So that's how you know you've got a carrot. The roots are tiny, spindly little things that taste just like carrots, but have got no flesh, no volume to them. It was actually originally domesticated as a medicinal plant, not a food plant. That's sweet Sicily, which is very common in the northern half of the British Isles, but not native down here, which has got a beautiful, it's a bit like fennel or aniseed. So it's just a lovely plant. It's a shame it doesn't grow down here. That one's growing in my garden. That is Angelica, and that's growing by one of the reservoirs in Hastings. Again, another really aromatic plant that people used to candy the roots and the stems. That's wild fennel, a lovely plant. Also very common around the sea. Just use that as grilled fish on. And that's the last one I'm going to go through today. That is a wild parsnip, which again is photosensitive. But smells just like parsnip, and that photograph was taken on the roundabout by Drusilla's that no longer exists because there's just been a load of roadworks and they've taken it away. I think I'm nearly at 15 minutes, no, 16 minutes and 54.
Excellent stuff. Thank you so much, Geoff.